travel, talking
Yeah.
about Shikoku and travel in the beautiful rural areas. And we will be right back, so stay tuned. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is Seeking Sustainability Live number 57. We have Sam Barclay, who's actually joining us from the UK right now. Thanks for joining, Sam.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah.
Sam and his partner run Hidden Japan Travel. Sorry, I got that the other way around. Focus on Shikoku travel. Cycling tours, food tours, and rural destinations. So we're going to be doing a deep dive into the wonders of Shikoku Island today. I'm excited. Thanks so much. Sam,
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, thank you so much. You want to start by just briefly introducing yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Sam Barclay. I'm from the UK originally, but my heart definitely belongs in Japan and on Shikoku. I first went to Japan after university. I was on a program called the JET program, and I was based up in just above Hiroshima in Shimane Prefecture, in a small town in the middle of the mountains with I think 4,000 people, but about 65% of those were over the age of 70. And it was just absolute heaven for me. It was a place where I fell in love with the beauty of the Japanese countryside and the kindness of the local people. So after then, I kind of
What was it called? Was that Mizuho? Sorry.
No, not too far from Mizuho, in a place called Suwano.
Okay, yeah, I know Suwano. It's not too far from us.
Yeah, it's kind of locally famous. It's a Sho Kyoto, but you say that and everyone goes, yeah, but it's in Shimane, and so no one travels there. But for me, it was the absolute perfect place to get to know Japan and to experience, to see a completely different side to the country. And I suppose that's really informed the business that we now run. So then I found myself a few years later in Matsuyama city, which is in the prefecture of Ehime, which is one of the 4 prefectures of Shikoku. So those of you who don't know, Shikoku is the South Island in Japan. It has 4 prefectures, and I was in the one in the kind of the northwest of the island, Ehime. And I'm biased, but I think it's the most beautiful and the best of the 4. Although there are wonderful places all over the island. So I was there for I've been there on and off ever since, really, and that was about 15 years ago. And Miho and I, so I run Hidden Japan Travel with Miho Ogura, and she's kind of, my best friend, and we started this idea for the business when we were cycling together. We both love cycling and love camping, love the outdoors, basically. And we were cycling through rural Japan, through rural Shikoku, and we'd been to these places, we'd been down these roads so many times before, and we just realized that there was a kind of quiet beauty to the places that we were going, and that was so clearly juxtaposed to the rush of the city. And I think people may gravitate towards the cities, and we just, on one of these cycling trips, we just said, wouldn't it be great if we could help people see this landscape, if we could help people see Japan in some ways through our lens and through the lens that we might just develop through our tours, and to show this side of Japan, so tourists are able to get a more balanced perspective when they visit Japan.
Yeah, for sure. I lived in Kyushu as a jet as well many years ago, and we visited Shikoku a few times and did cycling tours around. And it was always such a great trip. And even coming from Kyushu, Shikoku was somehow, I don't know, it's a smaller island, so it's easier to see all those great coastal views as you're cycling around. It's a wonderful place to cycle. You've also got the mountains, right?
Yeah, Yeah, so you've got the mountains. You're never too far from a mountain, and you're never too far from the sea. I mean, really. And then once you go into the mountains, you've got some pretty incredible gorges as well. So yeah, I mean, a lot of our cycling tours are run at the moment, they run in kind of pretty flat areas, which tend to be near the coast. But that doesn't mean there aren't other places to explore. So Mount Ishizuchi, for example, the highest mountain in Western Japan, is a really important cultural artifact and an incredible place to go climbing as well. And then to get there, you have to go through this really stunning gorge along the way. And, I talk about it for me, it's a very special place, of course. But it's also a place which is under threat in some ways. I mean, there's mass depopulation all across Shikoku, and various programs to try and improve tourism, which might involve kind of changing the dynamic, changing the local communities. In some ways, this might be irreversible. So we wanted to kind of use, not to exploit, but to work with what is there, both in terms of the community, the people, and then also nature, as a way to kind of celebrate that aspect of Shikoku, if you like.
Yeah, I love that. I'm showing your Facebook page right now, and you guys have a beautiful Facebook page, really nice website as well. Very simple.
There's not enough on the Facebook page.
Easy to navigate. No, I love it. Keep it simple. Why not? I like that. But in your Facebook page, About page, you talk about being a tour company based in Shikoku, Japan, passionate about introducing this beautiful part of the country to you. All tours allow you to see this area at your own pace, unique experiences, create lifelong memories. And you guys talk about your passion for the area and wanting to share it. But and I think that's beautiful and great. Just before we went live, you were talking about not wanting to share everything, though. Can you can you expand on that? Because I think that's very typical, right?
Yeah, there are a few secret spots that we have. There are a few spots and actually some of the photos are from those secret spots. So I've often wondered if people are able to work out the GPS, by right-clicking or something on one of the photos, and it will take you to some secret camping ground that we have. Yeah, there are a couple of places. There's a campsite. So one time, actually, it was Miho and I were climbing a mountain in the Iya Valley called Mount Tsurugi, and it was absolutely lashing it down with rain, and we were looking for a campsite. And as we were driving down the side of Mount Tsurugi, because we were going to camp on the side. There's a free campsite on the top of Mount Tsurugi, but we couldn't. The rain just stopped us from camping there. So as we were coming down the mountain, we were driving past this beautiful forest, and we just saw a flat piece of ground next to this beautiful mountain river. And we just thought, right, let's just stop the car. We'll just go and camp in this forest. And it was just stunning. And that's a place that no matter how many times people ask me, I'm not going to tell them. But that's
well, you have to have some secrets. I mean, but the whole the name of your business is Hidden Japan. So you have to be careful that other travel companies or other guides don't steal all your ideas, because it should be hidden and it should be new. But I think just the idea of, if you come on your own, self-catered tours, which a lot of people like to do, I would say if you're going to Shikoku or Kyushu, a lot of the areas, or even around Hiroshima, you are just not going to be able to do it without a local guide. Not just because linguistically, but just the know-how. I mean, you've been doing it for 15 years, you and your partner, and you know which shopkeepers have the best stories, right? You know which back streets to take, which has interesting things to see along the way. So it's not just go here, it'll definitely impress you. It's all about the storytelling as well, don't you think?
That's such a great point. Such a great point that I can't remember. I remember having a conversation one time about this kind of the trifecta of the things that we're looking for, and it's kind of a wonderful experience, a wonderful environment, and then also some kind of and then you have that story, then you have the narrative that kind of brings it all together. So just to give you an example, one of the tours we run, which is you travel to the mountains and you make soba noodles with a local. And that in itself sounds really appealing to me. I mean, I love eating soba, I love cooking, I love the idea of being in the middle of the Japanese mountains. And as I say, that by itself is quite nice. But once you realize, who the person is you're making it with as well, and her personality, and then what she can bring to the tour, and then you have that kind of constructed experience between either the tour guide or the person who's leading the cooking class in this case, and then also the guests. And that is somehow, that experience is inherently unique. Yeah? It depends on the relationships that you can build up with your tour guide or the person who's leading the tour. So really the personality of the person is really vital. And so the person that we work with in this gorge on the tour, she's a lovely elderly woman who moved from Matsuyama. She was a professional stained glass artist who relocated to the middle of the Japanese mountains for inspiration. She farms all her own ingredients, including growing buckwheat, and then she cuts the buckwheat, mills it, uses that to make for the flour, and as I say, grows everything that she produces on the tour in her own garden. So being able to work with someone like that gives it enables us to tell the story essentially, and introduce people to locals that they just really, really would never have the opportunity to meet if it weren't for tours like ours.
Yeah. And how has she received visitors? Is she appreciating people coming to visit, or is it kind of mendokusai and
No, not at all. She's so lovely. You can't imagine how lovely she is.
Yeah, that's
she's
lovely.
really great. She gets enthusiastic about it and ends up providing far more than we ever asked for on the tour. So,
yeah.
We only advertise making soba noodles, but undoubtedly there's coffee and there's dessert, and then there's like another round of food that she brings out just because she wants people to have a really great time.
Oh, that's lovely. And then, people always ask me who are interested in becoming guides or interested in opening up their restaurant or inn or something when I do consulting. They often say, but I don't speak English. And I always tell them, listen, it doesn't matter really, to be honest. If you have someone there who can help with a bit of English, but your kimochi, your feeling is welcome, and I'm happy you're here, then the visitor will understand that. And I think that's more important than having a translator or someone speaking English, right?
I agree. I think there are some things that transcend language and language knowledge, and I think one of them is personality. And somehow, we can have connections with people even if we don't perhaps speak the same language. And there's something wonderful about attempting to communicate despite kind of maybe linguistic differences.
Yeah.
I remember having a lovely when I first got to Japan and I didn't speak much Japanese. I went to a restaurant and with a local guy in Suano, and we ended up, talking for like 2 hours in very, very, very broken Japanese and pretty broken English. But we were both so engrossed in the conversation because we were doing whatever we could to interact and to communicate with each other. That we're still really good. We're still really close friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's those connections that I think a lot of people miss. We're based in Hiroshima, so when I meet visitors, usually they've been in Japan for at least a week, and quite often they say, I'll ask them, how's your trip going? Oh, everything's great, Japan's amazing. And then talking for a few more minutes, and they always say, Japanese people are so shy. Like, I haven't really had a chance to talk to anybody. Everybody's been so nice and very courteous, but that's so true, right? And I think that's another reason to take a tour with locals, because they kind of get you beyond that just greeting to a more real connection, don't you think?
I think that's a really, really great point. Yeah. So one of the our kind of principles, if you like, is that travel should be not just observation; it should be participation. And I think for a number of people, when they come to Japan, they observe culture. They go to Tokyo and they observe architecture, or they maybe have the food, but they're not actually involved in the process of creating that food, or they're not having a discussion with the person who made the food. And I think partly it's about the language barrier, and partly it's about the cultural barrier. And partly it's also about just being in a country for a short period of time, that it is inherently difficult to participate in the culture of a country in which you're in just for a few weeks perhaps. So one of our principles is to help people move beyond that observation and actually participate in their experience in Japan, whether that is making soba in the middle of the mountains, whether that's going on a private food and culture tour through a small Japanese town, which, walking through a bamboo forest up to an ancient pirate fort, or whether it's cycling across the islands of the Shimanami and staying in local hotels, one of which is owned and run by a fisherman who serves the food that he catches. We kind of strive to help people get beyond that level where they're just looking from the outside and perhaps taking photos and having a couple of stories, not to be kind of derogatory about that, because that's obviously a really nice experience, but actually get to the point where they can go home and they can say, look what I did, look what happened when I met some people, look what happened when I went out, I kind of went off the beaten path and took a risk. And so what we try to do is to support that, if you like. We don't want to overly engineer it, so all of our customers have an identical experience. We like to provide enough support to make sure that our guests are safe and to make sure our guests are having the best time, but we don't want to provide too much support, which would prevent each experience from being unique. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, in the Soba tour that I mentioned before, it's not, there's no manual, there's no script, there's no, this is what we're going to do do you know what I mean? So it's, in some ways, it's reliant on the atmosphere that's created at the time. Or on the tour of the Shimanami that we run, the Shimanami-kaido, which you might know runs from Hiroshima Prefecture to Ehime Prefecture.
Yeah, we're going to show lots of your great photos in a little while. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah. But
just to say, with that we provide loads of like a 40-50 page guidebook for that we've written ourselves, but we don't say you need to go to this place first and then this place and this place. It's not a guided tour as such that they're being led from one place to the next. We provide enough support to make sure that they see the best places, but ultimately it's their experience.
Right.
And we want them to be in control. We want them to be participating in their own travel.
Yeah, for sure. How many times do you meet travelers and, they had so much preparation, but I think especially European travelers or Western travelers, they often change the plans along the way and do something else because an opportunity came up or they met somebody who said, oh, you've got to try this, right? And it's a very different style of travel, which is like you said, now you're shifting to more domestic travelers. Well, that's a very different style from Japanese travelers usually, who plan everything in advance and do not deviate from the plan usually, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I think there's a large number of Japanese people, I think, who want that kind of travel as well.
Yeah.
Increasingly, they want that kind of unique experience.
Good.
In some ways, particularly going from a big city to an island like Shikoku, in some ways it's like a retreat, and I think treating it in that way, so you're not being handheld, you're not being led through a series of experiences, but actually it's a process of discovery, and you're kind of embracing that journey into the unknown, gives it the sense of exploration, which I think is for me anyway, it's so important to good travel.
Definitely.
But it's interesting you talk about journeys taking unplanned paths. If I could just give you a small story. So
please.
A few years ago, I was going for work. Had a conference I had to attend in Ibaragi Prefecture, near a place called Kashima Jingu, which is, as you might know, is a very famous shrine in that part of the world. And I got a night bus from Matsuyama to Shinjuku, and then my plan was to go from Shinjuku to Kashima by train. And you can't see I'm sat down at the moment, but I'm 6'3", to 190 centimeters, and I'm not really made for night buses. So I couldn't sleep the entire way. And I arrived in Shinjuku Station, and I said, "Sumimasen, Kashima made ichiman onegai shimasu." So can I have one ticket for Kashima? And they said, yeah, sure, that's going to be how much money. So I bought the ticket, and anyway, to make what could be a very long story, not that long, I ended up on a train to Sendai, which is, if you know your geography, is nowhere near Ibaraki. And then after that, I got on another train for 2 hours, and then I heard finally the next stop is Kashima. The next stop is Kashima. So I stood up, and I was in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I mean, no, I was just surrounded by fields, and there was a tiny sign that said Fukushima Prefecture, Kashima
Oh my
town.
gosh.
So I was also in the wrong Kashima, right?
Yeah.
So I had to travel by local train for 6 hours from this Kashima to this Kashima, and I ended up super late. I got in like on the last train, and I kind of rocked up to my accommodation. I was looking absolutely exhausted, and as I checked in, the guy said, you were meant to be here much earlier. What happened? And I kind of gave him a very brief summary, and over a beer, we talked about it a bit more length. And then finally he said, I said, so if you think about it, it's pretty rare, going to two places called Kashima in the same day. It doesn't happen every day. And he said to me, "Kekko aru yo."
Really?
There are quite a few Kashima in Japan.
Oh,
and I was
is
like,
there?
And at that point, I said, you know what? I'm going to go to every place called Kashima. And so for the next 3 years, I decided I hadn't been to them all, because in my mind there were like 5 or 6 or something. It turns out there are 47 places called Kashima in Japan.
Oh my gosh.
And so far I've been to 21 of them.
Hey, good job.
So that's about, I guess I tell that story because it's about kind of embracing the unknown and those kinds of wonderful experiences and wonderful moments.
Yeah, and then it becomes,
going like this, you end up going like that.
It becomes your thing. Your little narrow and deep that you know a lot about. You know about all the Kashimas now.
And it gives you a reason to travel to places that you would have absolutely no reason to travel to. And I guess this is where it links back to Hidden Japan travel, because if you're traveling in Japan, and you look at a guidebook, you have a reason to go to Tokyo. Yeah, you have a reason to go to Hiroshima. You have a reason to go to other parts of Japan as well. But there's a lot of incredible places in the locations perhaps that you don't have a reason to go to. And so we're trying to give people a reason to travel to those places. And we're trying to act as a vehicle to help them get to those places. Like, to give you an example, when I was on my kind of Kashima trip, which is I'm taking a bit of a time out at the moment from it, but I went, the first place I went to actually with Miho was in Wakayama Prefecture. In the south of Wakayama, there's an island called Kashima, and it became famous because there was a famous Japanese biologist called Minakata Kumagusu who lived near there. And this guy, once you start, and I'd never heard of this guy, I had no reason to learn about him. But when you start to read about his life, he's an absolutely fascinating human being who traveled the world, became respected by international figures of importance, met the Japanese emperor, and so impressed the Japanese emperor that the emperor changed his plans just so he could spend more time with this kind of eccentric academic. He spoke 19 languages, published in 5, is seen as being, one of the most intelligent Japanese thinkers ever to have lived. But yet he's not really known about. And so that I would never have learned about him had I not been on that trip. And in some ways, we're trying to facilitate that with the tours that we run as well. Okay, they might not be in Yama Prefecture, but do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's kind of showing the lens of Japan that you would just never have the opportunity to interact with were it not be for Hidden Japan.
That's wonderful. We have our first comment. Melanie Brock says, "Great discussion. Love Shikoku. Can't wait to visit again."
Ah, that's so good to hear. I love Shikoku as well.
So she's based long time in Japan. That is also part of your domestic market. So you don't have to radically throw everything out, not just for Japanese travelers. I hope we'll see a lot more international residents traveling around Japan as well. Now that it's not so crowded. I think that has always put me off, and for years now, I have not recommended anyone go to Kyoto. I always say, skip Kyoto, skip Osaka, skip Tokyo, unless you really like crowds. And now with coronavirus, that's definitely something you should consider. You know, you don't want to be around crowds all the time while you're traveling. So I think in that way, Shikoku, Chugoku area, Kyushu, there's a lot more appeal to the big outdoors, open spaces.
I mean, if there's one thing that Kyushu and Shikoku have little of, it's
People.
crowds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we should embrace that. And I'm so
Yeah.
happy to hear you say that you don't recommend people to go to Kyoto
No,
or
and
Osaka.
I wish they would stop spending money on advertising for it, because
I know.
obviously the advertising worked. You don't need to do that anymore. Everybody knows about it. Everybody wants to go. Let's talk about your Shimanami cycling tour that
Sure.
you do. I've got such great photos from your website and Facebook here.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
So the idea for this tour started when Miho and I were cycling over the bridge that links Imabari, which is on the Ehime side, with the first island, Oshima. And we were cycling over this bridge. We'd done it a number of times before. And we realized that every single time we cycled over that bridge, we were moved by just the beauty of the landscape. And as I said, that kind of quiet beauty that it has. In some ways, it's kind of a very humble landscape, which is, as I say, incredibly moving. And at that time, you know, Miho and I thought, this is a place where people maybe want to come, but they can't. Or people would want to come, but they don't know that they can. And so we thought, well, how can we help people see this landscape? How can we help people interact with the people and the culture here? And so we developed that. So we started to think about the kinds of tours we could offer. And, you know, there are some people who will cycle across the Shimanami-kaido. And just for those of you who don't know, the Shimanami-kaido is a series of bridges which links a number of islands in the Seto-ichi, the Seto Inland Sea. So you can travel from Hiroshima, from the Hiroshima side to the city of Onomichi, and then you can cycle 75 kilometers across a series of bridges and a series of islands to end up in Imabari, so on the Ehime side. And essentially then it's kind of island hopping by bike. Yeah, and the bridges are absolutely stunning as well, and the whole area is lovely. And some people do this tour in a day, and they miss out on a lot of the beauty that is around. Some people do it in 2 days, and they stay in a hostel in the middle, and they interact with other tourists, and that's totally fine. But we just said that's not really for us. That's not the kind of experience we want our guests to have. That's not the kind of tour that we want to recommend. So we came up with a 3-day, 2-night tour that starts in Imabari and starts in Onomichi and ends in Imabari. So on the first night, on each day, our guests do about 35, 40 kilometers. But if they're kind of real cyclists, they can do more if they want to. We give them extensions that they can take. The hotels that we use are kind of super local, out of the way places. So just to give you an example, the hotel on the first night, you can only get there by boat, and it's run by a fisherman. He serves what he catches that day, and it's incredible food and incredible, right next to the sea. It's just beautiful. Has a bath on the roof, so you can look out over the sea. On the second night, you stay in a hotel with only 4 rooms, owned by a small Japanese family, which is, again, the food there is just stunning. And so because we're locals, we can work with these people, we can build up relationships with them, and we can put things together which is kind of truly special. And then along the way, as I said, our guests have to do about 35 kilometers of cycling, but to make sure they're really well supported and to make sure they have a great time, we provide a pretty extensive guidebook of places that we pick, places that we've been to and that we love. Some of them are about culture, so there are a couple of kind of castles along the way. There are a couple of really interesting temples or shrines. Other places are about nature, so it might be kind of a hidden beach, or it might be a mountaintop prayer bell, for example, that people can hike up to. We also give recommendations for food and for drinks, so kind of local lunch spots that are out of the way. And these are all places that we've been to, we know, we've eaten there, we've spoken to the people there, we've said, look, if somebody comes and they can't really speak Japanese, can they just point to our guidebook and it says what's really nice, and they can order that with you, then they can order from you. And those people are totally fine with that. And so in addition to that guidebook, we also give each of our groups a phone. And on that phone is a series of Google Maps, and those maps also link to those places. And then the phone acts as a safety net. So if our customers have an issue, they can get in touch with us by the phone. So like, just to give you an example, we had a guest last year who got a puncture halfway up a mountain. He liked to cycle, so he was going to some pretty adventurous places and got a puncture half of a mountain and sent us a message saying, "Can you help?" And we were there within like 15 minutes to change his tire out, and then he was on his way. When he gets to his hotel, we move his bags from the beginning to the first hotel, and then the first hotel to the second hotel. So actually, we don't meet our guests for 3 days, but we're kind of facilitating their journey through this kind of unexplored part of Japan.
Wow, interesting. And can you talk a bit about the route? Like a lot of it is over bridges. You said it's mostly flat. I've got some pictures here. It looks like there are some hills, but you're cycling up so you can have a nice view, right?
Absolutely. And Miho and I often argue about this because I say, yeah, it's mostly flat, and she says, no, there are some hills. I think she feels hills more than I do.
I definitely do. Yeah.
I think I'm just focusing on the beautiful views. So there are a few hills for sure, because in order to get up to the bridges, you have to cycle up, and then to get down from the bridges, you have to cycle down. And there are a couple of hills across the islands as well. Particularly on the last island, there's a few hills. But in general, it's quite flat. I think probably for cycling in Japan, it's pretty flat. You can find hills pretty easily in Japan, even if you're not looking for them on a bike. So the cycling is not too difficult. And actually, one of the reasons why we started this tour is to help people who aren't kind of cyclists do the whole trip. I think it's become a really famous place for cyclists, but it still can be inaccessible for those who maybe who don't think of themselves as kind of athletic, for example. And so we want to support those people to help those guys also see an incredible part of Japan.
That's great. What kind of people have been booking the cycling tour? Like, where are they from? Tell me a bit about the demographic.
Yeah, so we have a couple of people who, so some of our guests live in Japan and are foreign residents in Japan, and maybe they live in, I think we had a few groups who lived in Tokyo and other groups who lived in kind of big cities, basically, yeah. And they wanted to have a break from the big cities, so they came with us for like a long weekend. And that's something that we were really happy to work with them on. Other times we've had groups from Singapore do it. We've had groups from America, from the UK. Mostly, our website is written in English, I think, so most of our customers tend to come from Anglophone countries. We had our market they're over 30, I'd say, between 30, and our eldest customer was 65. A single traveler from Australia who wanted to see rural Japan and just got in touch with us and said, "What can you do? Can you help?" And she ended up doing a cooking tour in Matsuyama. Nice. And then we worked out the Shimanami-kaido cycling for her as well. And she was really nervous that she said, "I don't think I can do it. It's 3 days of cycling. I'm not sure I can make it." And you can't imagine how big the smile was when she finished the tour. She was just awesome. Over the moon.
Yeah.
And like we had a couple from New York, and when they were all really serious when they started, and when they finished, the guy was like, "I think I'm going to move here. I think I'm going to move to this part of Japan." And his wife just stayed absolutely silent. I think she also loved it, but I think she didn't want to give up her Manhattan
right
house.
Yeah.
And then we had a couple who proposed to each other as well. So
it came. Lovely.
It's lovely that we can be part of that life moment for them.
So what's the Japanese level? Like, do you get people who can speak a little bit of Japanese? Have they traveled around before? Are you finding you're getting more like second visit Japan people, or you get any first timers? I would guess you would get a lot of people who've been to Japan before, but not to this area.
We do, yeah. So I think that's fair to say. Most of our guests are here for the second time, be in Japan for the second time, but a lot of them have no Japanese ability at all. So, and that's where we come in, yeah. That's kind of that's one of the reasons why yeah. So we pick places. The hotels we use, they don't speak much English, but we've set it up so that you don't need to understand each other's languages.
Yeah.
Like when you get to the hotel, the food is booked for you. The food is already paid for. Your luggage is in your room. There's also like a message card. So if you wanted to get, if you want the hotel to drive you to the port the next day, you just take that card and it's written in Japanese and it says, "Please drive me to the port." So all of those kinds of systems are in place to support people who don't speak Japanese.
Nice.
We do have some people for whom it's their first trip to Japan. And I guess the way we envisaged it is, you said before about Osaka, yeah? And I am in total agreement about Osaka. I'm sorry if anyone lives in Osaka who's listening to this.
I know people who live in Osaka. I'm sorry.
For me, it's when people ask me where they should go in Japan, and they say, so I say, where are you thinking about? It's my first question, yeah? And they say, I want to go to Tokyo, and then Osaka, and then maybe Nagoya, and then maybe Fukuoka. I'm like, yeah, those, they're great places, but they're pretty similar. I mean, if you've lived in Japan for ages, you can see the difference between those cities, yeah? And you can see the difference in cuisine particularly, and in kind of lifestyle and culture. And you can totally see that. I'm not saying they're identical, but I think the difference between those cities is nowhere near as great as the difference between those cities and the Shimanami-kaido, or between Shikoku.
Yeah.
And so we want to be that kind of third space, basically. So, you might go to Tokyo. If you're in Japan for the first time, you probably have to go to Tokyo, even for a short period of time. And then after that, maybe you want to go to Kyoto for a few days. Okay, great. And then on the way to Hiroshima, for example, swing by the Shimanami-kaido, have 3 days on the Shimanami-kaido exploring a completely different part of Japan, get the ferry, stay one night in Matsuyama, get a ferry to Hiroshima, and go back on your journey. It's like a 3-day excursion from the traditional tourist path. But I think what you would gain in those 3 days is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I do say, because of course people have to fly in once inbound tourism starts again, or even domestic tourism. The big airports are Tokyo, Osaka. But the greatest thing about Tokyo, Osaka is amazing places to explore as well. So you don't have to stay in the city center. And I think even for residents of Tokyo, Osaka, they would agree the less tourists in the city center would be better for everybody.
And I think there are stories in Kyoto that people can't book a table in a restaurant anymore. And actually, I think one of people know about the Japan Rail Pass, yeah, for international travelers. But I think one of the perks that's underutilized is that I can't remember what it's called now, like the Yokozo Japan tickets. So you can get a domestic flight to anywhere in Japan for like 10,000 yen if you're an international tourist, which is just incredible. So you can arrive in Narita, you arrive in Haneda, and you can travel from there to Kochi City on Shikoku for 10,000 yen. And you're there an hour and a half later. You can travel to Miyazaki if you want on Kyushu, and then work back towards Tokyo. So I think using those kinds of that infrastructure that's available can be really useful.
Makes a lot of sense. If people aren't cycling, do you recommend going around Shikoku by rent-a-car? There's really not a lot of trains. There are buses, right?
There are, yeah. There is a really great train pass you can buy. It's actually pretty cheap, and you can also buy a bus pass as well for like 3 days. We have details on our website about all of that on our Access Shikoku page.
Great.
And I mean, what we recommend is that people try to get to Shikoku by boat if they can, because it's so romantic.
Nice.
You can take a boat from Osaka, or from used to be from Kobe, but that's stopping, I think. So yeah, you can take the overnight boat from Osaka or from Kitakyushu, and that brings you up into Ehime, into Matsuyama, and you save your night's accommodation. You have a great experience. They have baths on the boat, which is great.
I love that.
I know, I do as well. And then you're
because it moves as you're moving. The water is moving as well. I did that going to Hokkaido. I love that. Yeah. Before we move on to Matsuyama, you can tell us all about Matsuyama Dogo.
Sure.
I love this feature that you guys are doing. You're giving people water bottles at the
Yes.
beginning of the cycle tour. Yay!
Thank you so much for saying about the water. I love those
That's
water bottles. I
awesome.
absolutely. Thank you so much. That's really lovely of you to say that. But while you mention that, can you see that our logo's on the side of the water
Yes, I
bottle?
can. It's a
Can
beautiful,
you work out what that is?
hard
The logo
wearing.
is.
What the kanji?
Yeah. So the kanji is travel. Yeah.
Travel, yeah.
That's it's travel. But if you don't speak Japanese and you look at it, does it kind of look like two people walking?
I
So the person.
saw I saw your animation of that. That was so cute. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got the left hand side is the I guess the guy and the right hand
Yeah.
side is the
You
woman.
should
Yeah.
you should also suggest, since you're giving people refillable bottles, that they download the MyMizu app,
Ah, that's a really great idea.
right? And then they can find out where all the refill spots are. I mean, it's not too difficult. Along the Shimanami, they have a lot of water refill places, but it's free and it's pretty convenient. I also like this eco origami envelope that your partner does. It's
Yeah,
gorgeous. Nice
I,
idea. Japanese
I
culture and reuse.
yeah. So we use those for the on our Shimanami-kaido tour partly. So the we because there are a number of ferries involved in the tour, we provide the fee that people need to pay on the ferry, and so each of them has like the note has the price for it on the top and stuff. So yeah, they know how much they just need to give the envelope over to the person on the ferry to pay for it. So we thought we'd make it interesting and give some lovely
Yeah,
Japanese
that's
tips.
lovely. I was talking yesterday about furoshiki, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I carry this travel set with me all the time. I don't know if you can see. Can you see? Can
I
you see it?
can't see, but
You can't see? No?
I can imagine. Yeah.
Okay, so the outside is furoshiki, so I can use it as a shopping bag. And then I just have a hairband, and then I've got chopsticks and a straw, reusable straw. And so I keep this in my bag all the time. Nobody's selling sets like that, but it's so easy, and then you don't need to get all the disposable cutlery, and you've already got a bag if you need it.
There
So
we
yeah,
go.
little
And I just
little tips.
and just to give a plug to Ehime, and if you wanted to put that kind of set together, find yourself in the Dogo arcade, and you could get an imabari furoshiki made of imabari material, that famous kind of imabari towel. They make some really lovely furoshiki, and there's also a chopstick shop there. You can get your name engraved
Oh,
in your
that's
own chopsticks.
lovely. Yeah.
They also have some amazing wooden bento boxes as well there, so you
You
can buy that all. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, you
Uh,
can buy it at one arcade.
the one picture I have from your website of Imabari is that the waterfall that you say there's a beautiful waterfall. Maybe that's part of the Soba trip.
Ah, yeah, yeah. So that's not in Imabari City. That's
Okay.
it's kind of in the mountains above Imabari, I guess. Near another the town that neighbors Imabari called Toon.
It's
So yeah,
gorgeous.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's really beautiful. And actually, that whole the I can't see the picture at the moment, but the kind of chamber at the back of which is the waterfall in Japanese is known as the Ryu no Hara, the belly of the dragon.
Oh.
And you really get a sense when you're standing, if you're like me and you're a bit, a bit stupid, you stand in the waterfall in the middle of winter and, and you look down and you can see icicles hanging down from tree roots down into this canyon. And it's just stunning. It's
Oh my
absolutely beautiful.
gosh. Yeah. Amazing. It looks like an amazing place. And how do you get people up there? By bus? You guys are a certified travel company. So
Yeah.
that means you can transport people as well, which,
So we can transport people if it's kind of a shuttle.
right.
We can. So we can shuttle people to the beginning of our tours. Yeah.
All right. We've got 15 minutes left. Let's talk about Matsuyama and your area, your hometown.
Sure. One of my favorite topics.
Yeah, go. Off you
So,
go.
for those of you who don't know, so Matsuyama is, I think it's the biggest city on Shikoku. I want to say it is, and it has a population of about 350, 400,000, but it's kind of merged with loads of different areas around it. So it's now the kind of the geography is massive, but in the actual centre is pretty small. It's a historic town. You might have heard of Dogo onsen, which they claim is kind of one of the oldest hot springs in Japan, and it's really stunning. The water there is a little bit too hot for some people's tastes, but once you get used to it, it's lovely, and it's one of the kind of the must-do things in Matsuyama City. Matsuyama also has incredible food. I mean, really incredible. The whole of Shikoku has great food. But just to give you an example of this, we were running a tour with some people who lived in Tokyo, and they came across to see us, and we took them on our Matsuyama food and culture tour. And we went to this place for lunch to have a local speciality called tai meshi, and they said, like, in Tokyo this would be the cost of the whole tour, just for lunch, because the quality of the fish is fantastic. So yeah, it's got an amazing seafood. It's got great location. You've got the mountains just nearby. You've got the sea 10 minutes away. We know that it's got great fishing if that's what you're into. We're just about to start a fishing tour, actually.
Could you run us through the food tour?
Yeah, that's a good one to say.
Yep.
That's really good. Otherwise, I'm basically just quoting Wikipedia, aren't I? That's a good thing to say. So our food and culture tour kind of visits some of the places that are slightly off the beaten track. So we start in a port, which is obviously by the sea, and it's kind of a very small suburb, I suppose, of Matsuyama, like the neighboring town next to Matsuyama. And we meet our guests at a really small train station in the middle of nowhere. And then from that train station, we walk up through a bamboo forest, up to a lookout point where you look out over the Seto inland sea. Nice. It's the images of the bamboo forest in Kyoto. Imagine that times 100, and with no one around you. It's somehow far more authentic, and a really kind of lovely spiritual place. And then from there you come down, you go across a boat. You go on a boat across a small stretch of water. And that boat's been running for like 100 years or so. I forget off the top of my head now. But and then we walk around. You walk around the local this small town, visiting some small shops that sell things like furoshiki and some ceramics as well. And then you have 2 dishes for lunch at these small places that are run by kind of locals. And then from there you get on bikes and you cycle back in towards Matsuyama. On the way into Matsuyama, you stop at the garden retreat of a haiku poet, and you have some time out from the city. In this small garden, you can sit and you can learn a bit about haiku. You can write haiku in this lovely place. And then that's where you'd also have some matcha green tea, or some sencha, actually, green tea. It's a place for sencha, not matcha. I think I'm right in saying that. Miho will tell me I'm wrong because I can never remember which one we get there. But Miho is very passionate about the difference between sencha and matcha, whereas matcha would be for the elites. Sencha is the working man's tea, and has a really important history in terms. Yeah, there are no kind of formalized rules with sencha, whereas there are with matcha. So in some ways, it's a much more free. It was a much more kind of freeing experience. And so from there, you cycle through the center of Matsuyama, over towards the Dogo area. And then in Dogo, we go to a lovely foot bath, walk through the arcades, and then finish with a glass or two of local sake. And if time allows, I mean, we obviously work with small groups, so sometimes our guests say they want to visit other places. So in the past, for example, we've taken people to temples on the 88 Temple pilgrimage as part of that tour. There's one temple that we like to use, and after kind of showing people how to pray at a Buddhist temple and how to kind of the meanings of it as well, why you might have your left and your right hand together, what your left hand symbolizes and what your right hand symbolizes, and why you do that. We then would kind of walk up through this cave towards the back of the temple, and then again we take our guests to through a bamboo forest to a lookout point where you can see pretty much over the whole of Matsuyama. So it's a tour that tries to help people see beyond just the two popular spots in Matsuyama, which are the castle and the onsen. And I'm nothing against Matsuyama Castle; it's absolutely fascinating and a beautiful place to go. And we have taken tours there in the past. But we feel it's the kind of place that, like, what we can offer is something beyond that. So we can offer the experience of traveling through a small town and recommendations of a small restaurant, whereas I think we have less value added with a place like Matsuyama Castle, even though we know a lot about it. And Miho does a lot of the touring, a lot of the guiding. So she leads people through Matsuyama Castle in the past, and it's really great. I think, again, what they gain from being with us in other places is perhaps bigger than what they gain in Matsuyama Castle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we like to show them the places that are slightly kind of off the beaten track,
And a chance to meet locals, not just the touristy spots. That's your niche, right? Hidden Japan travel.
Absolutely. It's about, what we like to think is about experience, exploration, and encounters. So all of our tours, we try and work out how those three things can be incorporated. So on the Matsuyama Food and Culture Tour, the experience is kind of cycling through the small streets, walking through these kind of local neighborhoods, meeting people, and then the encounter is meeting the people who work in the restaurants, one of whom is just a real character. There's a photo on our website. She's a real character. Also, coincidentally, there's these kind of two old chaps who sit by the road every day, and they just happen to be sat there every time that we go past them. So we build up a really great relationship with them, and now they'll say, like, I'm sorry, this is immigration here. This is immigration into the city. You can't come past this unless you take the oranges that we're going to give you. And so they bring oranges that they farm themselves. Aww. And they give those to our guests.
That's lovely.
Have this wonderful moment of kind of human interaction. It's just, it's wonderful.
That's fantastic. Previously we were talking about that if someone is welcoming, it doesn't matter if they speak English or not. It's that kimochi that's really important. But I think now, we've realized how beautiful tours and beautiful connectivity you're setting up for people. You also have to kind of train the customer to have the same attitude, right? Have you thought about that a bit? Like, do you try to word it in a certain way to try to get the visitor ready to be gracious? Not, we've all seen the bad tourist who doesn't seem to care about where they are and stuff. And I think you would probably get less of those kinds of tourists in Shikoku because they've made the effort to get there. But do you ever think about that? Like, you don't want to ruin the relationship you have with all these wonderful local people.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's something that thankfully we haven't experienced yet.
Oh, good.
I think partly it comes from, when they see our website, when people book on our website, they, will see what we're about, and hopefully they have this connection with not just what we do, but who we are and the principles that underpin the tours that we run. And I think if those principles align with theirs, and they kind of see themselves and their character reflected on who we are and what we do, I think we tend to get guests who are really gracious, who are really polite, and those who just really want to make the most of their time here. They're not going to be on Shikoku for long. We've worked with a lot of tour cruise ships, for example, and they might stop in Matsuyama for a day, and they just want to see as much as possible and get have a really authentic experience. So far we've been really lucky. Everyone
That's
has been
great.
really
Well,
really
knock on wood, that continues. Yeah. We have a great comment. David Key says, I like this. A gem to stumble upon this live stream. Thank you for joining, David. And I hope you make it to Shikoku someday. Check out Hidden Japan Travel. Yeah. So we have about 5 more minutes. Do you want to talk a little bit about the future of what you guys want to do?
So there's a number of tours that we're thinking of doing. So the Shimanami-kaido cycling tour that I mentioned earlier, which is, I guess, in some ways is our kind of flagship. It's one of our longest tours that we run. We're changing it up a bit. So we're going to still run what we have, but we're going to add another version that has a day of sea kayaking. So we're going to switch out a day of cycling for a day of sea kayaking.
Nice.
So you actually sea kayak with a guide, of course, in this case, because it's obviously quite dangerous. But you have, lunch on a beach that the kayak guide might make, and you sea kayak to your hotel. And then when you get there, your luggage is waiting for you. And then the next day you get on the bikes and you have another 2 days cycling. So we're really excited about that. That's going to go live pretty soon. Actually, we're just in final discussions with the sea kayak guide.
That's great.
We also have some other tours we're looking to run. We're looking to do kind of longer cycling tours, potentially to other parts of Shikoku. We're also looking at a few hiking tours. There's some really beautiful mountains on Shikoku, and some of them that have small houses on top of them. And so we're looking at like multi-day hikes where you are led by a guide to the top of a mountain. You then spend a night on top of the mountain, with the guide and with the person who owns the hut. And then, you come down the next day and just come back to normality.
Wow. That sounds amazing. We've got a question now from Tamie Turner. Thank you, Tamie. She says, great chat, guys. Interested in what Sam thinks the potential negative impacts of growth in regional tourism could be for Shikoku Ehime.
So it's a really, really great point. It's something that I think about a lot. And I think it's really pertinent with the Shimanami-kaido, particularly. In some ways, Shikoku's main selling point is also its greatest weakness, yeah? That essentially if it sells too much, if Shikoku is really beautiful, and its selling point is its nature and its culture. And if too many people visit Shikoku, then it's going to be harder and harder to see that, essentially, because you're going to be looking through a crowd of people. And that's really not what Shikoku is about. That's not what I would argue visiting the Japanese Inaka should be about. It should be about those authentic experiences with locals. And this is becoming a real problem, I think, on the Shimanami-kaido, where there are now more and more people visiting. And there are big companies coming in from other parts of Japan, buying up some of the land and turn them into kind of resort hotels. And often they do that without being too kind of derogatory here. I've got to be careful what I say. They do that without much consultation with the people who live on the islands. And I think where we would come in is saying, or our position would be that we want more people to come here. Yeah? We want more people to come to this really stunning part of Japan and see the beauty that it has to offer and the culture that it has here. But we need to work with the local community. We need to work with the people, and we need to work in a way that isn't negative, it isn't detrimental to the environment in which in some ways you're using to sell these tours. And that's one of the reasons why Hidden Japan Travel, we run small group tours. So we're not running kind of bus loads of 60 people to the middle of the mountains. We want to work with groups of 6 or 8, because part of the reason for that is that we can explain, if it's a guided tour, we can explain these beautiful places, and we can actually help people understand why they are so special. And if it's a self-guided tour, we can allow people the freedom to have that unique experience that you wouldn't really have if it was much larger groups of people. So it's a really, really good question. It's something that we're thinking about a lot at the moment. And I think Miho and I are aware of the role that we can play in trying to offset the negative impact of mass tourism that mass tourism might bring to this part of the world.
Yeah. In terms of sustainable tourism, we don't want to go back to mass tourism. So coronavirus has been a really good thing for sustainable tourism, because the only type of tourism that's going to be possible is not going to be mass tourism. It's going to be smaller groups, more open spaces. It has to be, right? This is the new reality. So hopefully more businesses like yours and less businesses like the tour companies that drop off hundreds of people in a small temple at a time, that kind of tourism hopefully is behind us and not really going to be happening anytime soon.
And I think think you're right. I hope that as well. I think the difference comes within like maybe our choice of verbs. Yeah. So like we want to show people and we want to help people see and to experience this part of Japan.
Yeah.
And I think there are some people who would look to exploit cultural artifacts for financial gain.
Yeah.
And I think that idea of exploitation is something that we have to resist at all costs. And I hope, as you say, I hope the pandemic will force us to reevaluate that.
I hope so too. I mean, any manager just looking at it from the outside, it's very tempting to say, "Oh, let's get as many people as we can." That's the success story. Whereas actually, what we know, people working inside tourism know, is what you see with the connection with local people is it's not the masses of tourism of people that doesn't benefit local people. It doesn't benefit local economies. Who actually benefits from that? Just the bus company, oftentimes, right? So,
absolutely. So what Miho and I talk about a lot is that idea of metric. And when people say, well, if you have 60 people on a bus and you drop them off at a temple and you make a ton of money from it, that's great. And you make all that success. That's not our metric of success. That's not how we're going to measure success. We're going to, we take a different approach and say, obviously we're a business. We look to make money. But we also have principles that we wouldn't cross in order to make money.
Right. Absolutely the way every tour company should be thinking right now. Thank you so much. Last comment from David Key. Smaller tours allow for true immersion in the culture rather than only heavily visually experience. And that's so true, right? The checklist tourist on the group tour or the mass tour who just wants to see things and check them off and take a photo and leave. We kind of want to get more from our travel experiences in future than that. And I think costs are going to go up, so it's going to have to be higher quality, more meaningful travel anyway, right?
I mean, absolutely. And that goes back to that point I was making about travel should be about participation, not just observation. Yeah. So, and checklists are kind of inherently just it's a form of observation. And you notice when you speak to friends who have been abroad or been somewhere new and they're telling you about their travel, and they might have their phone up and they're just kind of scrolling through the photos. Yeah, I went here, I went here, I went here, I went here, I went here. And then they did something really interesting in one of those places. And for 30 minutes, they tell the most engaging story you can imagine. But I met this guy there and we had this really interesting conversation and we did this and we did this. And it's those types of experiences, I think, that are, for me anyway, and for our guests and for what Hidden Japan Travel stands for, are transformative.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to, I think that's what we have to focus on in this kind of new normal or the next normal, whatever it is we're calling it.
Awesome. I agree 100%. And before we started this talk, you were saying, we don't really do sustainable tourism. Yes, you do. And thank you. Thank you for all the great work that you guys do. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
For allowing us to talk about it. It's great.
Oh, and, wonderful. I hope maybe it'd be great to catch up again in a few months' time once there is a shift to more. I mean, at the moment nobody's really traveling even domestically. So, in 6 months' time it might be a whole new ball game. It'd be great to revisit these themes, see how it's going.
Love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much everybody for joining today. And have a great weekend. Take care and see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.